because now I can see everybody. So I'm just going to acknowledge, as opposed to doing a roll call, just going to acknowledge that we've got Councillor Lisa Post, we've got Councillor Grant Peters, myself, Bill Ray, Sherry Marks, Shelley Brigant, and we got Patrick Neely here from the board. We're awaiting Ben McDonald, so if he shows, that's great. And from the town of Orangeville, we've got Darla Fraser, CEO of the library. We got Deb Van Anten of the library, who's taking minutes. We got Kim Carson. Thank you to Den Bonato again from the IT department for facilitating and putting this on for us. And we got Nandini Syed, who's also here as the treasurer of the town of Orangeville. Am I missing anybody? Anybody else? Okay, so with that as well, last time we did, if you'll recall that we did voting by assuming unanimous support, unless you said otherwise. But this time, now that I can see everybody, if we could just, if I call for a motion and vote, if we could just put the hands up, yes or no, that would be great. I think I saw that at the council meeting the other night, the marathon session, and it seemed to work well. So, anyways, with that, can I get a motion to, any declarations of conflicts of interest? Seeing none, can I get a motion to approve the agenda? Patrick and okay, and sorry, Lisa seconded. All those in favor? Anybody opposed? Carried. Okay, so the adoption of the previous library board minutes, both the regular meeting and the closed meeting. Is there any comments or questions about the minutes from the last meeting? Can I get a motion to approve those minutes? Sherry, seconded by Lisa. All those in favor? Anybody opposed? Okay. Presentations to the board. If Kim is still in the background, are there any questions from anybody?
No, not yet.
Not yet.
No questions. So if we could go on now to Darla for the information items, starting with the CEO report, that'd be great.
Terrific. Thank you, sir. Thanks to the support and assistance from other town divisions, I'm proud to report that library staff had this service, the curbside pickup, running within a week of the permission granted at the provincial level. We have delivered curbside almost 70 bundles of books to some very appreciative and happy patrons. So that we will see how the demand is from the community moving forward. We started this week with 3,000 items on hold, 500 different patrons waiting for materials. So we're just trying to get through the logistics of that and the books out the door. So it's a positive delivery, positive move in the right direction, I think. The next section refers to virtual programming and the collection of metrics or performance measures, and the difficulty or the complexity we're learning about virtual programming. And I guess the big takeaway is it's really not comparable, which is no surprise, to the in-person programming. And what we are reporting is 11 different programs and 513 unique views in that first week of the posting. And just to give you a reference, your own post, the library board meeting from last month, it had only 4 for the daily views, so that was the night it was released. You had a total of 36 views, 35 of those from unique viewers. So it's an interesting, and certainly the priority for staff is in delivering and developing programs, not the stats. That doesn't make the priority at this point. The program update, and you're probably aware, Miss McGrady and her co-star Victoria continue to entertain and delight viewers. I think we'll have to have an autograph signing time when we're back open to the public again. Mayor Brown and Councillor Peters did a great job with the Earth Week story time, and we continue to seek new ways to move existing pre-COVID programming into the virtual world. And staff are getting quite creative and quite savvy with the virtual world. So today's video for Tech Help was about Instagram. And they continue to seek ways to engage and entertain, while fostering the love of literacy, of course. And I know they have some new ideas coming forward about some challenges and contests or something. So they were very excited to pitch these the next level of engagement with programming, I guess is the best way to put it. Not sure if there's any questions.
I'm just happy to see, Darla, that people are watching virtual story time more than they're watching our past board meetings.
Indeed.
Okay.
So I'll move on to the financials then, if that's, and Nandini, would you care to comment? My only comment was, okay, we have 2 items this month with agenda item 6B. Can you see the difference? Dating myself with that reference to can you see the difference? I can't see the difference. There's a huge difference in that the second one offers the year-to-date budget up to and including April. So the variance is shown with the budget to date. Sherry, I'm hoping that was that meets your expectations, and we can keep both or just report on the one. I think the second one has everything. Nandini, was anything to add or? Questions or comments? Obviously.
Sorry. Through the board chair to Ms. Fraser, I would be happy to answer any question if board members have any question for us. But I think the financial statements are fairly self-explanatory. The only thing I would ask you to consider, and I believe I've mentioned that the last time I was here, or maybe I was presenting to a different board, with COVID-19, there has been a lag in terms of processing invoices as well as generation and collection of revenue. So even when we are presenting a financial statement dated as of April 30th, there is a bit of a lag. So we are all trying to play catch up at this point in time. So when you are reviewing financial statements, so just keep that in the back of your mind that there is anywhere between 4 to 6 weeks lag in terms of expenses being paid versus revenues being collected.
Thank you, Nadini. I believe Sherry's got a question.
I have some dogs in the background. I'm trying to stay on mute as long as possible. Just out of curiosity, the line where it says internal allocation, what does that mean?
Go ahead, Nadine.
Running, right, so it's internal allocation and we're positive, so we're ahead of budget, which is great. I'm assuming that's not tied to revenue or expenses, it's something tied to the budget, or is that, what's influencing that positive number?
So any internal allocation, generally speaking, are chargebacks between departments within the organization.
Does that answer your question, Sherry?
It does. Would we, like, is there a reason for the positive variance then? If it's internal allocations, you would have full control over that number, or is it maybe a percentage of another number that is causing the variance?
So I'll I'll try to tie this back to what I already said, is that, first of all, we would like to see a positive trend in our variance analysis. I mean, that's the trend we all hope for, right? That goes to show that we have budgeted well, and a lot of effort and heart went into putting together the 2020 budget. Now, we obviously were not aware of COVID-19. So going back to what I just said, there is a bit of a lag in terms of processing invoices versus recognizing some of our revenue stream. So any variance that you're seeing, maybe the subsequent financial statement that we'll bring in front of you will probably take care of some of the anomalies, so to speak. So one of the things I've asked, again, for the board to consider, that as you're looking at some of these numbers, please bear in mind that there may still be some outstanding invoices for the month of April or for the month of March. Specifically answering your question, now obviously the financial statement, I do not have the privilege to drill back and see exactly what that is, which I can definitely clarify with the email. But anything that says internal allocation is essentially allocation between departments, and most of the time it's a chargeback to a different department. It could be allocation of staff time, it could be allocation of something else. But at the end of the day, as I've said, a positive trending variance analysis is exactly what we are hoping for.
Completely agree. Thank you. One follow-up question. If these, I understand the 4 to 6 week lag, from the line where it says compensation, since that's the majority of our positive variance, compensation wouldn't necessarily have a 4 to 6 week lag though, right? Because that's payroll at the end of the day. So I would assume that 56,000 variance is a result of instead of 4 to 6 weeks delay of transactions not being entered, it would be the reduction in staff from COVID-19.
So again, through to the chair, to the board member, you're absolutely correct. Let me rectify myself in saying that when I talk about the lag, I'm essentially talking about any overhead costs. So any cost that is outside of salaries and benefits. Any positive variance that you are witnessing on the salaries line or the benefits line are essentially due to the wage gap measures, and which again resulting out of some of the steps that we have taken in response to COVID-19.
Any other questions, Sherry, or any of the other board members? Okay, moving on then, Darla. I think we're on to the incident report, and I don't think there's too much to say about that, is there? Okay, so then continuing on to the Library Services Index.
Which, the big news, of course, is on the continued increased usage of the electronic resources. And we're seeing unprecedented numbers. I know that word's a bit overused, but 1,000% increase in the sessions opened, and a 1,600% increase in the number of retrievals, so downloads. People are spending longer on the resources and finding more. Well, the retrievals are the downloads, so finding more information is what we assume. As I mentioned, there was 3,000 items on hold at the beginning of the week, and we're getting those sorted out. We know that not everybody will want the hold. Some of them were put on pre-COVID, and so we are calling everybody. And so far, there's only been, I think, 5 people out of the numerous calls made who have either already read the item or are not comfortable borrowing from the library at this point. So we talked about the stats for the virtual programming, and there's a lot of zeros in this chart, unfortunately. As you know, the library closed on March 15th, and the numbers for reference questions and information requests fielded through staff are, of course, quite low, but we are still open and helping people, so that's positive. I think that's all for the information items, Mr. Chair.
The electronic resources, the increase in the volume of that, do you have any data as to what type of resources are being downloaded? Is it children's content, adult content? Is it,
It is a mixture, and
the only reason and it's really more curiosity than anything else, just because I know that it's been a real challenge for you know, for working parents to be able to have their kids focus on curriculum that's been downloaded, you know, from the education system. So I'm just curious as to how it compares, you know, given those challenges.
And of course, Kim has a breakdown that gives us exactly how many how many hits on every single page, which is too much information. And I did highlight in the report the fact that the most used items are the Niche Academy, which is a new service, right, with the short videos, and Press Reader, Flipster. So it's not the children's content, and I believe that there are a number of resources available through the education system, and Tumblebooks is our strong children-focused resource, and that's also available through the schools. So.
Okay. Okay. Any other questions of Darla? Okay. Can I get then a motion for the information items to be received as listed? Patrick, seconded by Grant. All those in favor? Anybody opposed? Okay. So we're into the part 7 of the agenda, which is the procedure bylaw that we had the notice of motion on the last time we met. And attached to your agenda package was 2 copies of the actual procedure bylaw, a clean copy and a red line copy, so that you could see what all the changes were. Darla, do you want to just speak to maybe some of the highlights of what's changed, and then?
Sure. So according to the bylaws, the notice of motion was posted last meeting that we were going to make some changes. And the library, as the board chair mentioned last month, the library conducted its first virtual meeting despite the lack of provision within the local procedure bylaw. And based on the suspension of certain provisions under the Emergency Management and Civil Protection Act, the Ontario government issued an order on March 31st suspending certain provisions of the Business Corporations Act and the Corporations Act, and substituting therein temporary provisions. The temporary provisions permit virtual or electronic shareholder and director meetings despite any provision in a corporation's bylaws or other constituting documents. So we were legal last month, and the changes for this month, really the focus was on changing the quorum to recognize virtual attendance by participants, and then some parameters around a meeting like today where all participants are participating remotely. We also did some housekeeping. You'll see we changed all the chairmen to the chair as per this board's direction. And and we did add a clause under the roles and responsibilities for the chair, adding the statement, a caveat to the last paragraph to allow for, in the case of a declared emergency, a different decision-making process.
Any questions for any of the board members? Nope, pretty much as expected. All right, can I get a motion as per the agenda for the change of the procedure bylaws? Moved by Grant, seconded by Lisa. All those in favor? Carried. Okay. So now to the, I guess, to the I don't know, I think more interesting items that's on the agenda tonight, and that's talking about, I guess, the COVID-19 recovery plan, and then we've got an interesting discussion to have about internet filtering that's coming up. So we'll start with the COVID-19 recovery phases for service implementation, and as you know, we're at phase 1 and we're now phase 2, and we proceeded with phase 2 in spite, prior to being able to discuss it here as a board. But certainly when we had the opportunity to go into phase 2, we wanted to take full advantage of it as soon as we could, given that we knew we had demand from the public. So we're now in phase 2, but Darla, I'll let you take over in terms of summarizing the report, and then we can certainly open it up to discussion.
I would start by saying it's a work in progress. Nothing's set in stone. We are learning every day from the Federation of the Ontario Public Libraries, from public health, from a number of sources, and we are adjusting our processes and environments accordingly. So it is just an outline. You'll notice that stage 1 is fully closed and online only. And the stage 5 I presented as a new normal, a post-COVID-19, and so it really leaves 3 stages or phases in the middle, and I believe we have the ability to ramp up or scale back as needed in each line independently. So we might be able to move as a block into the next phase, but there might be times that we only can move in one section, or we have to pull back in a certain area. I'm hoping that a template like this gives us that ability. Certainly timing for public libraries recovery will depend on many factors, including health orders and restrictions mandated by the province and local municipalities. Full return to pre-COVID-19 conditions is not expected until after the development and implementation of a vaccine for the virus, which, according to some experts, could be as much as 12 to 18 months from now. Recovery of public library operations and service delivery will be an opportunity to reimagine service delivery with conditions of continued physical distancing measures and more stringent disinfectant and sanitation processes. I did take you through each section of the plan, and I also would say, working closely with the municipality, this phased approach it has been developed for the library, but designed to align and support the town's overall recovery plan.
And and it's conceivable, and hopefully this is not the case, but it's conceivable that we're phase 2 and hopefully could proceed to phase 3, and then if things flare up again, we could be back to phase 2 or back, hopefully not, but to phase 1, right?
I believe that is a possibility, and but we'll stay positive for now, and hopefully it will be a smooth progression.
Right. Now, Darla, you and I had spoken about how there was a sense of pent up demand for curbside pickup, and you're about a week into it now. How are you finding it, and how's the reaction been?
Just a couple of days into it, Mr. Chair, and very positive.
Okay.
So,
any questions or comments from? Anything else in the report? Any questions or comments about the different phases or the measures being taken? Darla, did you want to describe the process that's being used to take books back in terms of the process of how we take them back in and the quarantining of them? And
certainly. So we have set up the meeting room, the lower level meeting room, as the quarantine area. As books come in through the book drop, and they are being dropped in the book drop beside the entrance on Mill Street. Those books are gathered up with full PPE equipment on staff, and they're handled as little as possible. They come where they drop in, into a bin. That bin goes down into the quarantine area, and those books aren't touched for a minimum of 3 days. After the quarantine period, they are processed, and then holds are identified and people are being called. We had, I think Kim brought back approximately 200 to 300 books from Alder that had holds on them. We haven't opened Alder at all. We gathered those items and had them shipped back to Mill Street. Because they've been quarantined in the Alder location, we didn't re-quarantine them. And the research seems to, or is guiding us that the virus does not live on newspaper or the books. Once if the droplets go onto the items, they can't re-vaporize. So the time is the best disinfectant as opposed to trying to wipe them off. We are wiping down the DVD browsers, the plastic covers, and staff are using gloves and masks. We have paper bags that the items go into. There's a number that people call. Once the pickup time is arranged, the books are packaged up and sitting waiting. We have a table full of bags with names on the side discreetly. The person calls the cell phone to let the library staff know that they have arrived in the area. Then the books are placed on a table outside the entrance and people come up and collect their bag. So it is a touchless system that seems to be working. The hardest thing is keeping people apart because people want to chat and and the library staff miss the people and the people. Anyway, we are being respectful of social distancing.
Okay. Any questions from any of the board members?
I have a question. If it's, I'm just curious, are there any of the staff that were laid off? Are they back yet or no?
No, sir. Not at this point.
Any, well, okay, I guess there's no way of knowing either. I just worry about those guys, that's all. Okay, thanks.
Is there a certain phase that's identified, Darla, that
Certainly, as soon as we can, as soon as demand warrants it. At this point, community demand will dictate the human resources required to maintain this service. Right now, we've pulled everybody back and who is working and focused on this service.
It would take the reopening of the library. It to some extent to really, start to look at. Okay. Other questions, Sherry? I believe you have a question.
Yeah, I'm just curious. As you described the process, Darla, where the patron calls and says, "I'm here," and the bag is put outside, is there any risk that some random individual just grabs the brown bag and walks down the street?
I don't think so, Sherry.
Okay.
Of course, we're in front of the glass doors, and we're on Mill Street. We also have the window. Typically, staff are familiar with the people calling, and it hasn't been an issue. I didn't think of a random library heist.
Fair. Yeah, it's not a large grab and go area. So.
They are very coveted items, I tell you. So it wouldn't surprise me, but.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions? Okay. Seeing none, if we can have a motion as stated in the agenda for the receiving of this report, and that we adopt in principle the recovery phases for service implementation to be applied at the discretion of the Chief Executive Officer. Can I get a motion to that effect? Shelley, seconded by Sherry. Any other comments or questions? Okay, all those in favor? Unanimous. Okay. Moving on to the item for discussion, and that's so there's no motion or anything like that. It's just here for discussion purposes for tonight, and that is a memo that was prepared by Darla that on the topic of internet filtering, because it's come up in past board meetings that were pre-COVID. So we've finally got an opportunity to be able to put some material together with some research on it and some information for the board's consideration. So hopefully everybody's had a chance to review the memo, but Darla, if you just want to walk us through it at a high level and whatever comments you have, and then we'll open it up to discussion.
Sure, it's an interesting opportunity, and I'm delighted that the board was open to fielding some of these discussions, because I think it's important. As a board, you inherit the policies that were adopted by your predecessors, and there was a question brought up recently about internet filtering, and you have adopted the position that technology is contrary to the principle of intellectual freedom, and that it's not effective in making the internet safer for children nor preventing criminal activity. So that is the position of the board as it stands now. As a librarian, I feel a responsibility to uphold the principles of intellectual freedom, including access to information. Everyone should have the right to, and the means, to learn about anything they choose to without having to explain or even disclose what they're looking for. That's what the public library does. However, as a civil servant, I admit I'm growing a bit weary of defending open access to the internet. If the board, as the governing entity, does not hold that same conviction as on the books now, then you do have the authority to change it. I just want you to consider, and I hope that the discussion can be about what the board wants to stand for in those principles and values. If it's the wishes of the board, staff will, to filter, then staff will rewrite the internet services policy, and I'll arrange to have them on. At this point, it's probably easier for staff if they were filtered. It's not a big issue in Orangeville, and I think staff do an excellent job at handling when there are issues. But as you see, libraries across worldwide actually come at this from different directions, and some offer completely access to the internet, some offer a choice, and some, like us, do not filter. But that is a governance decision, and I'm curious to hear the board's position on it.
Got a question, Bill?
Does that?
Yep, Grant first.
Yeah, just Darla, could you maybe expand on some of the libraries that have both? So in some cases you've said they put the filter on kids' computers or ones meant for that type of use. I totally get that. Not all of them necessarily have that level of description. Burlington, for example, like we have here, offer a mix of filtered and unfiltered. What sort of distinction would there be? Would that be locations within the library, for example? Like what criteria might they use to filter some and not others?
Absolutely, and it is position and signage in the library. And Burlington was one of the first libraries to offer an option to patrons, and they did that for the community to see if there was a preference. And what they found was the choice, offering the choice met the demand. And there were people that wanted a computer that was filtered and others that didn't care one way or the other. So, however, the Burlington Public Library, the where I first saw that, is a huge facility. So there's a block of computers that are unfiltered and a block somewhere else. And there's 2 different blocks of children's computers as well. We have 1 children's computer at each branch. Does that?
Yeah, that's great. Thank you.
Okay.
Any other questions? Or comments?
I'll ask another one. It's a quick one.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do we have the tools in place if the decision was made to do the filtering, or would this be a software package we'd have to purchase, for example?
Good question, Councillor Peters, and it would be a question I would have to speak to IT. I can't say for sure. I think we do as a corporation, but I don't know.
Yeah, okay.
And do we know what the sophistication level is of filtering products these days? And I guess I asked that kind of question because, you know, for example, if somebody was wanting to, you know, research breast cancer, for example, you know, is that going to, you know, if we're filtering on words of that nature, are we going to have unintended consequences of somebody not being able to research something like that? Or are they so sophisticated now that I don't know? So that's why I ask.
And I don't know the details either. It is a question for an IT specialist. What we do know is that as the level of sophistication in filters grows, so does the tech savviness of the hackers. Right? And I don't believe the filtering systems identify certain words now. I think that but I don't know. So that wasn't something I looked into, was the actual mechanics of the filter, sorry.
Okay.
I could build on that, Bill. Sorry, just a related topic, and again, not going in a particular direction here, just asking, you may not know, Darla, but right now, if, you know, is it possible to review sites that have been viewed by patrons, not to assign them to a specific patron, but for example, could or does the library do a sweep or an inventory to see if anything pops up that might be something that we would want to know about? You know, I'm thinking if we, you know, there's both sides of the argument about filtering or not, but I guess if no one's even accessing the sites that we might want to filter, then, you know, it could be a completely unnecessary step. Whereas if we had the ability to, or were able to understand if some of these sites were growing in popularity or being flagged in some way, like right now we have no data on what this might, how this might impact the user, and maybe it won't at all, if you know what I mean.
Mm-hmm. I don't know.
Yeah, that's fair.
That is a good question. If we did have an indication of what the history is like of some of these sites that are accessed, we would be able to run that against, I guess, a filtering database to be able to see if there would have been any hits or not.
We actually have an IT expert on the meeting with us, and I wonder, Mr. Chair, if we could ask Dan to weigh in at this point.
Dan's comfortable weighing in by all means.
Sure. So I've heard a few of these questions coming in. I can't answer them, but if I'm missing anything, please do repeat them, because I do believe I had an answer for every one of these questions.
Sure,
so,
go ahead.
So for the filtering, in terms of whether how the filtering actually works, there's a few different levels on how the filtering works. So we do, actually, I'll take a step back. We do have software, yes, in place that is corporate wide, and it is already currently filtering certain things. So illegal activities, for example, it is filtering. So that by default, town wide, we do filter anything that would be illegal activities. The way the software works is it's a software package that we purchase that is also used by several other private and public industries. And it's a centralized company whereby things get submitted to them, different sites, and they keep a massive database of what is considered inappropriate and appropriate. And then we have an option within our software package to check. We want to, for example, we don't want gambling sites, or we don't want a bunch of different categories of what we don't want people to view. Within that, you can set different levels of how it gets filtered. So you can set, again, I'll use the example, if you don't want people visiting gambling sites, it would just block those right away if they're on those lists of sites that have been identified. You can also set a level whereby people are allowed to view it, but it's called a monitored site. So it will give them a warning that this is being monitored, you can proceed, and then that can run a report that these people visited this site, and then you can look at it for later review. Or your third option is don't monitor it at all. These are perfectly acceptable sites and they can go through. I hope that answered a lot of but if there's any other questions that were asked, you can feel free to repeat them again.
Anybody else? Questions or comments or?
I guess just to clarify, Dan, are you saying that those programs and filtering is currently running on the library computers, sort of without any sort of fanfare or awareness by the user?
So currently the only thing we run on the library computers right now is just for anything illegal. So that would be downloading illegal copyrighted content or things like that. So just for anything that would put the town into a legal position, that's the only thing that just blocks those right now. Currently it's not filtering anything else or monitoring anything else.
Okay, thanks.
Dan, are there modules of that package though that could be built upon if we wanted to block, for the things that weren't necessarily illegal but were maybe questionable?
Absolutely. It's actually, it's broken down to, I think there's close to 300 different categories on there, and it's broken down into, videos, YouTube, entertainment, all sorts of different things. So yes, it's very custom. And then also beyond that, if we need to as well, we can also create our own. Just beyond it's recommended you use the package that we use corporate wide and then with other companies, because that's your best case scenario, because it's, power in numbers, whereby, if it's a pornographic site or a site that's inappropriate, someone else will catch it as well as you, so it verifies it. But if that doesn't work, you can also make your own whitelist and blacklisted sites as well that are just unique to you as well.
Right. Okay. Any other questions or comments on this topic?
I have one quick question, if you don't mind, Darla. Is there language at all in the Public Libraries Act that talks about parameters that are put in place for any filtering of content? I just worry it's a bit of a slippery slope. So, where do we block, where do we not block, and what do we filter and unfilter? So, if there was language already set out in the Public Libraries Act, then that could give us some guidelines or parameters of how it's best handled. Just curious if that's outlined at all.
Not in the Act at all.
So it's really at the prerogative of each board? Yes.
There's obviously the statements that form part of the report, right? The Federation of Canadian Public Libraries statement on access to information, and those policy statements. The American Library Association really, they got in that awkward position where they were saying, we don't filter as libraries, and then there was a certain level of government said if your computers aren't filtered, you're not eligible for some funding. So they had to back off. I mean, so the reality is it's a governance decision by a local board, and there isn't a right or wrong answer.
Any other questions or comments, or do people want to reflect on this for a month, and then we'll bring it back maybe and see if the board wishes to do anything with this next month, or is there anybody that has any strong desires to do anything with this now? Not seeing any. So with that, maybe we'll just table it for now and reflect on it, and if there's a desire, we'll bring it back next board meeting. Okay. Moving on, items for discussion, new business. We've already covered the filtering memo. Is there any other new business that any member of the board wanted to bring forward? Okay. Any reason to go into closed? Seeing none. Municipal update, Councillors Post or Councillors Grant or Peters, either one of you, sorry.
I don't have anything.
Think there's much to update. Certainly nothing that would relate to the library and its activities.
You had a long meeting this week, but nothing really related to libraries.
Yeah, anything but.
Everything but. Any other questions or comments? Darla, do you have any announcements?
Just mention that the website development continues with eSolutions. What else did I have? Oh, the Friends, we had to cancel the Friends plant sale, the annual plant sale. Very grateful to Sustainable Orangeville members who have relocated the seed library for us for this year. Thank you. The annual survey it was submitted this week, finally. So that's good. That makes us eligible to receive the operating grant, which I've commented in the past. The grant, which hasn't changed since 1995, we earn it with reporting on these stats and the different requirements by the ministry. So that's completed, and we're just happy to offer the curbside, and please call in your orders, get your books on hold, and we'll get them out the door to you.
And otherwise, as far as other announcements go, I would have been very, very pleased to have been able to host a barbecue again this year, the members of the board, but unfortunately, I don't think that's going to happen. But it certainly was my intent. And with that, is there anybody else that had any other comments or announcements or anything else they wanted to cover tonight? See none, I think that's about it. So can I get a motion to adjourn? Patrick. Seconded by, somebody's got to second it. Sherry, all those in favor? Okay, thank you very much, everybody, and we'll be in touch between now and the next board meeting if there's anything to update the board on, and have a good evening.
Thank you.
Everybody.
Thank you.
Take care, everybody.